Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game.
Board
I Got
game.
Board Game. I'm Ben,
I'm John.
and today we have a special list fitting for this time of year. We are going to do our top 5 stocking stuffer games.
What is a stocking stuffer,
What
Ben?
is a stocking stuff? So, actually, I don't personally put up stockings. I don't know if you do.
I used to, not these days,
Okay,
not
I don't
recently.
think I've ever done it in my whole life, but
Uh,
but
I
this
know what I'm
is
getting
this
you for Christmas.
a stocking, not any of these games, just the stocking.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, it is a common tradition in like at least U.S., right? And how people celebrate Christmas. They'll hang up like a kind of custom-made stocking, usually kind of like maybe by a fireplace, and you can stuff gifts inside those. And so for this list, it's essentially kind of like a top 5 gift games during this time of year when people are giving gifts. But then the key requirement for this list is that they have to fit inside a stocking. And so usually if you guys picture what a stocking is usually like, they are pretty wide, usually wide red sock bag kind of a thing. And so obviously they won't fit like a lot of the games back here, but we agreed on a certain size that would probably fit inside a stocking for someone. And so just to give you guys an idea, the requirement we had for this that both John and I had was they had to be games that are smaller in size than say like this resistance box, which is kind of too wide and maybe a little thick for fitting into a stocking. And similarly, we use this as an example too, this Traders of Osaka, which is also wide but also longer.
Mhm.
And so the game overall had to be smaller than this size to make it on this list. And so with that said, we'll also share a bit about other considerations we had when making this list, the more kind of individual considerations we had aside from that box size that we agreed upon. And so, John, were there other things that you were kind of thinking about when thinking of like gift games?
Yeah, and so kind of in the theme and the thought process for stocking stuffers in my mind, typically a stocking stuffer type of gift is usually smaller, as we mentioned with the sizing. But I was also thinking usually you're not throwing expensive things inside of a stocking. So in my consideration, I tried to keep my games under a certain dollar threshold, under $20 as much as I could, just because I was thinking if you're buying something that's more expensive and larger, or like not larger, but more expensive, you typically don't throw that in a stocking. You probably will wrap that and put that under like a tree, right? If we're thinking about this thematically for the Christmas time gifts. Other things that I thought about was because it's the holiday season, you tend to be around family and you tend to be around other people, loved ones in some capacity, or friends, spending time together in groups at home, sitting around maybe a table and such. So I thought when I was thinking of my games, I also thought of trying to think of games that are good for larger groups, or at least would have interest for parties of people or groupings of people. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're all party games or large games, but that was just something I was considering. And then as another idea, because these are gift giving, to give different thoughts of options or ideas of games as a part of my top 5, I actually did a split of a combination of whether they were competitive cooperative games, whether they were competitive or cooperative, and making sure I had representation from both sides, as well as the types of gameplay that you would be doing in these games. So then it's not like I would say, like in the example that Ben had shared, I wouldn't offer you like Resistance and One Night Ultimate and this, like games that are kind of the same style or the same type of game. We tried to steer away from that as much as I could. So that was my considerations.
Okay, great. And yeah, for me, my main consideration actually that I needed to actually think of some more considerations to help me narrow the list down, the main one I considered was that the game has to kind of be easy to teach, to learn, to get playing. And so that kind of includes, how simple the rules are, how many different mechanisms are a part of it that people have to learn. And it also includes like how long it takes to set up the game, kind of whether it's like organizing the cards or what other pieces you need to take out. So that was the biggest consideration I had, because I think giving a game as a gift, you want people to kind of be encouraged to jump in and play it, and not kind of just get a really nice looking game from you, but be too intimidated to learn how to play it. And then I think just kind of the other consideration I did with my list was I tried to customize my list a bit, kind of move some games around so that there are games with different mechanisms in it, kind of like what John mentioned.
Mhm.
And so I tried not to repeat games with the same mechanism or same kind of like player count, if you will. And so but yeah, mainly the mechanisms, even though my list will be in like a top 5 order of like, I think the top game is maybe the better one of all the games. I think what's more important for you guys in using this list is to kind of choose a game that has a mechanism that you think would be most fitting for whoever you're giving the game to. And so, yeah, those are my considerations. And so with that, we will actually do a secret number 6, the honorable mention that I forced John to do before we started this video.
Yep, yep.
And so my honorable mention, basically my number 6 that didn't make it into this top 5, is Werewords.
Werewords.
Or this is Werewords Deluxe. There is a regular version of Werewords 2. I think both are generally available, but I would say if it doesn't cost that much more, I would go with the deluxe version, since it basically has a handful of other characters or roles that people can be. But basically, this fills this slot of my kind of social deduction game, where this is actually slightly social deduction, mainly a word game, where you have one person who knows the magic word. Everyone else has to try to figure it out by asking yes or no questions, only yes or no questions. But there are some hidden roles in it that could be people trying to throw people off track and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think this is very good for like a high number of players. I think on the back it says 4 to 20 players. So, and well, at least this version, because of how many roles there are. This is kind of like the big group game, also a social deduction game. And it didn't make it into my top 5 just because I think not everyone is comfortable with social deduction and like kind of bluffing or misleading people in games. So that's kind of why it's not like a for sure gift that will land. But for people who do want to play that kind of social deduction with a bigger group, and also primarily a word game, kind of putting the social deduction part a little on the back, making it a little lighter aspect of the game, I think this is a good way to try that out. And so, John, your honorable mention?
So my honorable mention game is Exit. The game. Woo! So the Exit game series is, if you've ever done an escape room before, that's basically this board game. It is a escape room condensed into a series of cards, usually within the box, that you have to kind of sequentially go through and solve these puzzles together as a group. So it's a cooperative game. This is also this is an experiential game, because once you play it one time, you can't really play it again because you already know how to solve your puzzle or how to get out, right? Because that's what these games are all about. This is why it actually is in my honorable mention, because it doesn't have lasting power in comparison to most board games, where you can probably play board games more than once. This really is kind of this unique niche, but it actually makes for a great experience together, especially for people maybe if they've never played board games, or they maybe like this thematic idea of maybe kind of doing this deduction or puzzle solving in this guided manner. And it's not like you have to go pay a lot of money to go out to like an escape room or like schedule it out to go to one of these places that hosts them, but you can just kind of buy this game, bring it home, play it with some friends, and then it's done. And then at that point, you can even potentially then gift it to other people to let them play, assuming that it doesn't have components that you need to destroy in any capacity. I think there was one that I've played one time that actually did something like that. So I can't remember exactly, but maybe not an exit game, maybe a different version. But that being said, that's why this is in my honorable mentions category, because I think it makes for a great gift. If you had like a group of family or people getting together for the holidays to just place through something, and it's not too much of a commitment, you jump right into it, you read the instructions, and you already start in the puzzle. So
Okay, and so then getting on to the actual top 5 now. Number 5.
Number 5.
So my number 5 is a 2-player game, which I am usually inclined to a little more just because I think they can be very creative, but also I do kind of think maybe around this season, spending time with family or just close ones, you might have more of the opportunity of just kind of when you're lounging around, kind of just picking up some game with another person versus always needing to like get a whole group together, unless you have a big family like someone. And so that game, my number 5 is Hanami Koji. So Hanami Koji, this small box game, is, like I said, a 2-player game, and the main mechanic in it is what's called I Cut You Choose. And so the way that mechanic usually works in games is you'll present like an opponent, like maybe a certain number of choices, like 2 choices, and they have to choose one while you get the other one. And so that's kind of the main mechanic, but you're kind of doing this in different ways to try to get the cards that you want on your side, because thematically this game is set up to where you're competing to win over geishas to your, I believe it's your inn that you're running. And so you kind of have to have the cards or the gifts that those specific geishas want. And so you're going to be doing this I Cut You Choose to try to give your opponent cards that they might not need, and you get the ones that hopefully you need and they don't realize it. And so you win over the favor of the geishas, and then ultimately you need to reach a certain point threshold or win a certain number of geishas over the rounds to win the game. If you don't, then the game kind of continues by shuffling the deck again, dealing it out, and you going through the process again from wherever the favor already lies with the geishas. So you continue from how well you've done so far. And so, yeah, it's just a very clean game in the kind of actions it tells you can do, and how the cards themselves actually work out number-wise to just run really smoothly. Like you won't be questioning like, oh, are we gonna run out of cards, or do we put a card in the wrong place? It's it's just put together really well in like the card count and the actions, the limited actions you get to do each round. And so that is my number 5, Hanami Koji, which also has very nice art.
Nice.
Okay. And then John's number 5.
So the number 5 game for me is one that you've probably seen if you follow our channel regularly and have watched our videos. But my number 5 game is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. So, yes, so we've done a review of this game. So if you want to review or hear more about the details of this game in a more like a deep dive, go watch our video. But The Crew Quest for Planet 9 is a cooperative game. It's a trick-taking game. So you're working together in playing tricks, a series of tricks, which is, usually some form of you're playing cards in certain sets by the leader who's playing. And you're trying to, in this game, you're trying to work together to achieve certain goals or certain rules every round that you're playing, or every main round that you're playing with the whole group. for whatever mission objective that you're in. I think the game comes with like, I think a total of 50 missions that you're supposed to, continuously go through in the course of this. But you can pick it up at any time. You can start on mission 1, the tutorials, or if you've been playing with a group of people, you continue off from the last time you recall whatever rule set you were on. This is a great game. It does take a little bit to learn, especially if you're unfamiliar with trick-taking games in the sense, but once you kind of pick it up, it's a really, it plays pretty fast. And it's one of those nice, it's a fun game of really working together as a group and trying to achieve these objectives. And I think as you start playing more and more, and you start getting closer and closer and fulfilling these missions, and you start having more difficulties, it kind of draws you in with the, how do we keep doing these kind of objectives or these kind of scenarios, which typically just get harder and harder, or they add more layers of complexity that you have to think about. So great game. I think it plays up to 4, not 5, right? I think up to 4, or is it 5? I can't remember exactly how many people can play in total.
It can play 5. It can play
up to 5. Up to 5 people, which is also pretty nice in that way. But this game is actually great even with 3 people. Usually 3 is probably what I'd say is a good number. 2, it's a little bit maybe on the easier end because it's only between 2 people to think about. But playing kind of 3 players and above is a nice spot for this. So yeah, so The Crew, number 5.
Okay, nice, very popular one.
Mm-hmm.
And so moving on to number 4.
Toy Story 4, or at least the look of Toy Story 4.
So my number 4 is a game that fills the category of a bidding game or bidding auction game, and that is 12 Days, which is very fitting for this list also. Hopefully a very fitting game for Christmas and wintertime. And so thematically, this game is going off of the 12 Days of Christmas song and kind of making the deck of cards around that. So it is what's called a pyramid deck of cards where there are cards numbered 1 through 12, but then there's 1 1, 2 2s, 3 3s, all the way to 12 12s in the whole deck. And also, this game should not be confused with 12 Days of Christmas, which is actually a separate game. This is just 12 days. But yeah, with this pyramid deck, you're basically dealing those out to all the players. It plays 3 to 5, which is a good size, obviously bigger than my 2-player game. And what you're going to be doing is every round you're simultaneously bidding, basically playing 1 card from your hand to try to win each day of Christmas. And so you start with day 1, which if whoever wins gets that card and is 1 point. Then day 2, you'll bid again, and whoever wins that gets 2 points. But the way you win is by playing the lowest numbered card out of all the players who are playing a card that round. And so you can kind of start to imagine how there's that trying to outguess your opponent and which cards they have in their hands. Like, there's only 2 2s in the deck. So, the chances of someone playing that are lower, but they have a higher chance of then winning that day of Christmas. But then the other part that then kind of makes this tricky and makes it interesting to think about is at the end of the game, aside from the points from the days of Christmas you win, each player will also compare who at the end has the most cards of a certain number in their hand. So who has the most 12s at the end, right? Just whoever has the majority of 12s will also get 12 points. And whoever has the most 11s at the end will get 11 points. And so there's those 2 ends that you're trying to plan for to get points by. And so I think this just has that fun interaction, simple idea, fast because you're playing simultaneously. And so, yeah, I would recommend 12 Days as my number 4.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Well, my number 4 game is not that game. My number 4 game is a game called Welcome Back to the Dungeon. Ooh. So officially, this is a game that's for 2 to 4 players. My family and I have actually played it with more players. You can. The balance is slightly off that way, but you could technically play this game with more people. But basically, the premise of this game is there is an adventurer that is going to be entering into a dungeon. And basically what you're doing as players is you will have to decide at the beginning, or you will have to decide whether you're going to stay in the game or for the round, or if you decide to chicken out, right? So this is a combination of being both a game of chicken and a game of bluffing as well. Because if you decide to stay in the round, what you do is you will be drawing a monster card and from the deck. And then when you draw that card, you will have a choice. Either you can add the monster into kind of the dungeon itself, in which that would be whatever your adventurer who's going in is going to fight, or you take the monster card, you discard it, and your adventurer will lose a piece of equipment that they would have going into the dungeon. So the idea is that your adventurers start out with a full set of equipment, but as the course of people drawing cards and playing goes along, it's either that there's going to be more monsters that you're fighting, which could potentially be, detrimental to your adventure because they have to survive the encounter in the dungeon. Or if you're not adding that monster into the dungeon, you could be removing items such as, in this example picture, this dragon leash that could help protect you against this really dangerous dragon and the following monster after, right? This is kind of this game of deciding like, okay, and then once you finish playing, once all but one player passes, the one player who did not pass must be the adventurer, take the adventurer through the dungeon. So if they're able to survive through the dungeon successfully, right, because the adventurers have a certain amount of HP, then you will gain a victory, right? But if you don't, and your adventurer dies, then you lose a life, right? And you have up to 2 lives until you're out of the game, right? So it's a very fast game of bluffing and just kind of deciding, am I staying in the game or am I not staying in the game? Because you have to decide, when they took away this equipment, are they doing it because they know they got rid of a monster that it affects, so it's actually fine? Or is it like, nope, it's just a really big monster and now you're all in trouble because if you go in, you're just gonna die. So it's a great game. It's really fun, really easy to pick up too. There's a little bit of setup, but it's not too much. You just have to lay out your adventurer row and like the adventurer you're using, and then it's just shuffling the deck of the monster cards and then just playing and then just drawing and playing as you go. So it's very simple, very fast setup, and you can just play through this game real quick. So
and just to clarify for people, there is a game before this one that's just Welcome to the Dungeon. Yes. And that's pretty much the exact same game as John described it, just different heroes to choose from. Yeah. So either one will play the same, just which heroes do you want to be able to choose from in the first game or the second one?
And then they might have some additional, like, I think there's some special monsters that might in the expand or the second one, Welcome Back to the Dungeon. I think it's like
with like special
0 abilities. Cost or 1 cost monsters that do slightly different things, but that's more for like you can set up your games ahead of time to do that, or you can just throw them all together and just have every single monster in the entire deck too. So that is Welcome Back to the Dungeon, my number 4.
Nice.
And it's competitive too. If you pick up on that.
Competitive. And so going on to number 3. So actually, let me take this off. Not number 34. Stuck on the 4s. Number 3. So my number 3 is a game that I played quite a bit more recently. And so it kind of came to mind with this list. And it is just on the borderline of what John and I agreed upon as the size of a game that would fit inside a stocking. I think John saw this one coming. And that is Paperback. So you can see the size of it. Paperback. It's not as long as Traders of Osaka and not as wide as that in Resistance, but it is kind of more boxy. But it would fit in a stocking, I believe. So
it might take most of the stocking, but it does fit.
yeah. And so, but obviously, this is the biggest game on my list. Paperback plays 2 to 5 players, and the basic way to understand it is this is a deck building word game. So deck building is a mechanic that we did explain in another video, I believe, right? The IGBG explains that, you can check that out. But you're essentially every player starting with the same standard deck of cards with letters and wild cards that can act as any letter. And on your turn, you're just drawing your hand and spelling a word. And whatever word you spell, with whichever letters you use, they'll give you a certain amount of currency that you can use just in that round to buy from the row of other letter cards, which have different costs. And then you're adding those to your discard. Eventually, once you run through your deck, you'll shuffle your discard. So that's how you get your new letters, new cards into your deck. And then you'll draw and play from there. And so so that's how deck building works, but it's mixed with this word game idea where you're just trying to spell words each turn. And so that's kind of why I chose this. It fulfills both being a word game, which might interest people, but then deck building is kind of the unique new mechanic mixed with the word game aspect. And so, and it plays very well. Like this also made my list because I had mentioned my consideration of games that are easy to pick up and set up, where even though it looks like a big game and kind of has a bigger footprint, takes up more space on a table, it's actually very easy to set up because all the cards, at least in my version, is sorted with dividers. So, all the 2 cost letters are in a pile, and then 3, 4, 5. So when you're setting up, you just literally pull it out, put it on the table, and then, it's just easy to set up that way, putting everything where it needs to be. So it's quick. And then, really friendly as a word game, but with that thinkiness of a deck building game. And it is surprising also in a good way to notice that this game is now available at Barnes and Nobles. Because this is an older game. I think it came out maybe 8-9 years ago, maybe. That's my guess.
Been a while.
Quite a while ago. And it was kind of hard to get on its own. Like you'd have to get it directly from the publisher, the creator. But yeah, since it's in Barnes Noble now, it's good that it can get more attention. So yes, my number 3 recommendation, paperback.
Very nice. Very nice. All righty. So for me, my number 3 game is slightly different in a slightly kind of different direction and different way of the games that we just mentioned. But my number 3 game is Avenue. Yes, so this is what we call a flip and write game. So the way that this game works is that there'll be there's a set of cards that you'll be going through. So usually some leader or somebody will draw a card, and then based on the card that is drawn, there'll be something that you need to do. And so in this case specifically is you'll have like a pad of paper or you'll have a chart that you need to write on. So the premise of this game and the basis of this game specifically is that I believe you're like you're setting up vineyards and you're trying to create an avenue that connects different kind of grapes in vineyards to the different farms. And so the way that it works is that there's a set of farms. I think there's normally 6 farms that exist on the sheet. But at the beginning, when you first start the game, you take one of those farms out, and then there's 5 rounds of scoring. So after a certain, after certain cards are drawn, once it reaches, I believe, once it reaches the farm card, or it's a certain number of the cards that you're drawing.
Yeah, I think it's like 4.
It's like every 4 cards,
4 yellow cards or something.
Yeah, every
like
4 yellow cards within the deck that you're drawing, it'll move into the first scoring round, which would be connected to whatever the farm is showing, farm A or farm B or farm C or whichever one is showing up. And then based on how many connections you have of the roads that you have with grapes on them that connect back to the farm, that's how you score for that round. And you always have to have more grapes connecting from one score to the next. So let's say in the first round I scored 6. In the second round, I would have to score 7 or more, because if I don't score 7 or more to that farm being connected, I score 0 points. And that actually also gives you some negatives later on in the game too, or negative scoring points as well. But basically it's a combination of not only just making connections, but also making consecutively bigger and more connected avenues as you're going along through the game. And so in the game, when you flip the card to show, the thing is that you can draw whatever road based on what the road shape looks like anywhere on the board. So I could draw my, road, let's say it's like a corner looking piece. I could draw it in the top left corner, but Ben, if he was playing, could draw it somewhere else on his own board entirely. So every player has their own choice. And it's kind of just how do you want to connect and how do you want to build out your road connections in this game. So it's a very simple game. All it really requires is you just need a pencil and you can just literally pick up the deck, shuffle the cards out, figure out what the farm cards are, and you can just start playing right away from that point. And then at the end of the game, you just follow, or as you go through the game, you'll do the scoring. And at the very end of the game, you do the final tallies of scores where there's some extra bonus points you can make depending on making certain connections. But that's pretty much the game. It's very easy to pick up. You can play it with, I don't know what the official age range is, but even like you could play it with anyone as young as they're able to understand that I can draw this box. I can draw a line in a box anywhere. Right? Whether they do well, different question. But this is a family-friendly game. You can play with a number of people. You can have as many people playing this game as you want, because it really is just a matter of people just drawing based on what you write. So kind of I would say minimum 2 players, maximum as many sheets as you have to play with. So. So
yeah, no, good choice. This was up there on my list too. I was trying to choose games of different mechanics.
Yep.
And so this would have been my recommendation of like a roll and write, flip and write game, which is a very family friendly kind of mechanic. And it's also language independent, right? I mean, you just need to know A, B, C, D, E kind of a thing.
And even then, it's technically as long as you see the symbol.
Yeah. So you don't need to read anything, and you're just drawing the lines. Yeah.
So one thing I will mention though is I don't believe Avenue is in print in the United States. I do believe Avenue was a European made game. So I don't think you can officially buy Avenue as it is. The re-implementation of this game, which follows the same rule sets or very similar rules, is called Kokoro, I believe, is the game. Kokoro Avenue to something. I forget.
Yeah. I think like Avenue of the Kodama or something like that.
Something like that. But that is this game. I think it adds a couple of extra rules you can play with if you'd like to. And I think it's just additional scoring criteria. But that would be the game that you would want to look up if you wanted this style or like if you wanted this game or this type of game. Because at least on a quick Amazon search, it was not on there. And then I looked at a random like eBay thing on the next link and it was selling for $100. So that's not in my threshold.
$100.
That is not in my threshold of $20 and under. But the Kokoro re-implementation of this game is $20.
I think it's sorry. I'm just looking it up real quickly right now. I think it is called Kokoro
Avenue of the something. We can also put a link on.
Avenue of the Kodama. Yeah,
like Kodama. So that is my number 3 game, Avenue.
Okay, nice. And so going on to number 2. My number 2 is the game that I chose to fit in the category of cooperative and limited communication, and that is not Hanabi as Peter might want. If you guys have seen our Hanabi review. Sorry, Peter. But the game is The Mind. Let me take off my 3. The Mind. So this is this small box game here, which is ultimately an abstract game. The theme really doesn't mean anything. And it's just a numbers game. And the whole idea is you are cooperatively playing through different levels where each level each player's going to start with a certain number of cards in their hand. And the whole deck in this game is cards numbered 1 through 100, one of each number. And so each level, you're going to start with a certain number of cards in your hand. And the whole idea is you're going to be playing cards in ascending order together. So if I have like a 5 and John has like a 12, then I'll need to play my card face up first in the middle, and then John will need to play his. But the other part I mentioned about is that it is a limited communication game where the main idea is you can't tell each other what you're holding, any of the numbers you're holding. And the game has no turns, right? Once you start the round, there is no turn order. You're just going when you think you need to play your lowest card. And then someone else might think that it's their time to play their lowest card. And so it's going through each level in this kind of game loop of playing cards in ascending order together without communicating. That is very fun. And we do have a review of this game. And I was kind of going back and forth between this as my number 2 or Paperback, where Paperback is more thinky because of the deck building. But I think the thrill of when you get this right, like even just like on lower levels when you're starting out, you know, like level 1 is like everyone has one card and you play, like I play the lowest and then your card is higher. Okay, good. We like finished. But then once you get to like even like level 3 or 4, where each player has 2, 3, 4 cards in their hand, then you start kind of wondering like, how are we gonna do this? And when you successfully play cards that are even just like off by 1, like if I play like my 22 and John immediately plays 23, it's like, whoa, okay, we somehow did it, and that feels great. And so yes, I think it's a great experience. And that's really what it is. It's more of the experience of games, similar to maybe how John had talked about the exit escape room kind of games, right? It's that experience, but obviously this is a replayable game. All right, you just kind of shuffle the deck, you're not using up any of the game. And so you could kind of keep playing it as long as you enjoy that thrill of playing cards in ascending order.
Yep.
Simple idea. And it plays 2 to 4 players. And it is available in like Target, and I think maybe Barnes and Noble. So it's like really easy to find nowadays. So my number 2, The Mind.
Very nice. Have you ever been one mind with anybody?
No, I have not.
Shout out Robert Bowie. We just done it. We have been one mind.
Whatever.
But yes. So great. So for me, my number 2 game is a competitive game, and this kind of fills my niche of the social deduction, but it's actually not quite social deduction. But this game is Coup. Woo, Coup. So basically, this game actually does take place in the universe of a social deduction game that we've mentioned before, talked about, The Resistance. So it's part of the same dystopian universe and that kind of space. But what this game is about is that you are, I believe, political leaders of some kind, and you're trying to utilize these representatives, and you're trying to use the influence that they have in order to, you know, navigate the political atmosphere and stay and come out alive and on top of all of your other competitors. That's kind of the thematic aspect of this game. But basically the way that the game plays is that you will have 2 secret, you know, influences in front of you that will be yours. And what you'll be doing is you'll be trying to take out your competitor. So there's a few ways you can do that. There's effectively causing a coup, which is to just basically wipe out somebody's influence, or you can then do a number of other actions, as you can kind of see on this player, you know, player helper card. But the interesting and the crazy mechanic about this game is that it's a deception game, because you as a player, when it's your turn, you can choose to take any of these actions that exist for any of these roles, whether you have the influence in front of you or not. You can choose to take any of those actions. Now, if you are claiming to take certain actions that do have certain characters, that's where players will then have an opportunity to challenge you in that way. So that's kind of the special part of this game, is that, you know, you can claim to be anything or claim to have any kinds of influence, but if someone challenges you, and you will have to reveal if you're being challenged, you have to show whether or not you have that influence. Because if you do have the influence, so basically if you're telling the truth, or that you actually have that, you know, that political savvy or that political influence, the other player then loses one of their influences. And then that's a way for you to get rid of them, or if you've been trying to lie your way through and they catch you in your lies, then you lose some influence because then you're shown to be a fraud, right? Is kind of the idea behind it. So that's the game of Coup. It's a super fun game. I like, this is a very old game too. Game has been around for a very long time, but anytime I've played this game, people really get into it. And they really, it's very like, after the initial trying to understand, like, oh, I can do anything. I can play as any, I can claim any action, right? Or any counter action, right? Once people really pick up on that idea, you really get some really fun kind of situations where we've had people who have claimed, like, every single player in like a 7-player game has all claimed to be the Duke and, you know, the captain and the ambassador, where it's like there's only 3 of these roles in the entire deck. Not all of us could be it, but nobody wants to call it out, right? So you get a lot of fun situations in which it's like, oh, should I do it? Should I not? And it's like, no, you call them out. No, you call them out, right? And trying to claim your way into victory. So my number 2 game, Coup. I think base game is up to 7 players, if I remember correct. Well, wait, no. 36, 9.
I think base is.
I think the base
is
game
it like 5?
Is just 5 players.
5, yeah, 5 or 6 or something like that.
5 or 6. But if you have a second set of this game, you can actually add duplicates up to 5 in each of these roles, and then you can expand the game that way. And I think there are rules in the booklets that mention that, or there's definitely house rules that exist. I think I've played games where we've had 7 to 9 players in a game. Again, whether it's balanced or not, that's a different question, but you can expand the size of this game. But I think it usually plays up to 5 players, but that's cool.
Yeah, and I think as another clever part of it too is just the novelty to how it did that social deduction aspect, right? Where in a lot of games like Resistance or Werewolf, it's you are bluffing as the same role like the whole game, right? And that can be kind of tiring or get kind of boring, or you kind of waiting for someone to slip up. Where then, yeah, one of the brilliant aspects of Coup is that you can bluff as any role on any turn. So you're not just stuck playing the card you were dealt, or just stuck playing the same thing you already bluffed, but comes down to then how good you are at bluffing and changing it up at different points. So yeah, good choice. And and before this video, you had mentioned it's really cheap right now.
Right now, yeah. So if you see this video, well, depending on when we officially post this video, but as of today, the 12th of November, calling it out, it is on sale on Amazon. I think a 40 or 50% sale. So it's actually really cheap right now. Usually it's $15, so it's not that expensive. But if you order it now, you can get it at like $7 or $8, and maybe you can pick up multiple copies for people who you think might like this. So great stocking stuffer game.
Okay, good. And so getting on to the end of our list.
Number 1. The champion.
The number 1 on this top 5 stocking stuffer games. My number 1 is what fills the trick-taking category, which John has mentioned a trick-taking game already. The Crew. Is mine The Crew? No, it's not The Crew.
I knew it. I knew it.
Did you really?
Well, you said trick taking, and I was like, you're not really The Crew, so it's gotta be.
Okay. Yes,
there's no other small box trick take.
Yeah, that's true. So this small box trick taking game, I do love it because it is also a 2-player only trick taking game. So again, if you find yourself in that situation during the season where you have just one other person to play this with, I think this is a great 2-player choice because of how great it does trick taking just with 2 players, which is usually a mechanic you don't think would work with just 2 players. But it's both the idea of trick taking with the slight adjustment with a trump suit, which is all stuff we explain in our trick taking video, IGBG Explains. But then it also has a scoring mechanic where your main goal is not to win too many tricks or lose too many tricks. And so that's where the real thinkiness and meat of the game comes from, where once you understand or already knew how trick taking works, then it's about playing it in a way so that you just win kind of the middle amount of tricks each round to get the most number of points overall. And so you play up to a certain point limit, and whoever reaches that first wins. There is also some other small things, like I think the odd number cards are the ones that have special abilities, which are nothing too crazy, but I think it kind of can help change the pacing a little bit while you're going back and forth in this two-player game. And then I would also say I think the game just has a great look to it. If I can show some of those cards, I just think it has like good kind of negative space with the white on the outside of a lot of cards, but then like those specific colors for these three suits in the game, it just looks really nice when you're playing, really clean looking, but it also just plays in such a clean way of being trick taking, which is a very clean mechanic in itself, but then even just kind of keeping track of your points with the tokens it includes. And so, yeah, I really enjoy this game and how it looks, and would definitely recommend it as a stocking stuffer game. So my number one, The Fox in the Forest. And don't confuse it with, I believe there was a sequel called The Fox in the Forest Duet. I think that's what it's called, which is like a co-op two-player trick-taking game, which I haven't played, but from reviews I kind of glanced at a long time ago, that did not do well. So probably stick to this competitive two-player trick-taking game, The Fox in the Forest.
Well, if you want a trick-taking cooperative game, we've already given you an option. Yes,
And so, John, you're number one.
Yeah, so my number one, so this actually falls similar to Ben's number two in so far as, you know, a cooperative kind of limited communication style game in deduction and kind of working together with other players. But my number one game is Simolo.
Okay, that's what I thought from your description.
Yes, so Simolo is basically what this game is you'll have one player who's a clue giver, and so what they'll be doing is they'll draw a card out of the deck of a bunch of different cards, and Simolo sells them in packs of like themes, thematic packs like history or mythology or animals, and then fables or fairy tales, so on and so forth. So there's different kind of theme packs. But basically what you'll do as the clue giver is you'll draw one, and that'll be the one that you're trying to get the rest of the people who you're playing with to guess. But what will happen is you'll take that one card, you'll set it aside, and then you'll draw 11 other character cards from the deck, shuffle them around, and then you'll lay them out in a tableau in front of you. And then you'll draw 5 new cards. And then from that point, what you'll do is you will then show one of the 5 cards from your hand to the rest of the players. You'll play it out, and then you'll either lay it kind of vertically, like normal, kind of facing, to indicate that the card is similar to the character or to the card that you know you need them to guess, or you turn it horizontally, indicating that there's something about the card that is not similar or dissimilar, as we like to say,
dissimilar
to the cards, to the card that you want them to guess, or you're expecting your team to guess. And so then what will happen at that point is that your teammates will have to choose a card to remove from the tableau at that point. So it's not that you're going to try to figure it out in one go, but you will then have to remove a card. And then what will happen in the following round is, you know, the clue giver restocks their hand to 5. They'll play a second clue. And then that round, for the second round, the players will then have to remove 2 cards based on the clues that have been provided. And then the third round is 3. The fourth round is 4. So it's escalating in terms of the amount of cards you have to get rid of. And then if you can make it to that point, the final round, the players will have to choose the card to get rid of. And whatever card is remaining should be the clue giver's final card. So that's the entire premise of the game. That's literally the entire rule set of the game. I explained in not even 5 minutes. So very easy, very simple game to pick up. Even though they're themed to these particular kind of styles or types, this game is just about the visuals of what you're seeing. So you can utilize that as ways of giving clues. Obviously, if you do know things about the specifics, like things such as like mythology or history, there's, if you know the characters, the types of characters, if people are knowledgeable about that, you can combine them together, or you can find maybe different clues that you can hint at. But as a limited communication game, the only thing you can tell the players is whether it's similar or not similar, but you don't even tell them what exactly is or isn't similar. It's up to the team to figure it out. It has a similar feeling to if you've played Codenames, where when you only get a single word clue, and then maybe like, but it's actually even less communication technically than Codenames, because Codenames you get a word and then you get a number involved with it. In this game, all you're seeing is whether there's a similarity or there's not a similarity. That's all you're being told by the clue giver. So that is my number one game. Again, I had a lot of options of like these kinds of games like Hanabi that was mentioned, the Mind, that kind of all have that limited communication working together. But I think Similo is a really great one. And there's a lot of different types. There's a lot of different themes. And the other great thing about Similo is the fact, as kind of alluding to, is you can actually mash different decks together. So if you have like a history deck and you have a mythos deck, you can actually take half of each of those decks, combine them together, and play with a combined set for the Similo game, which is also a really unique way. I don't think we've ever done that yet, but it's a pretty interesting and fun way of thinking about this game, and it's easy for anyone to play.
Yeah, I've told John it'd be funny to play with like a history deck where you're laying out the characters that are historical figures, but then the clue giver has to give clues based off the animal deck, and kind of saying like, oh, the historical figure is similar to a cat, and it's like, what? What are you talking about? But yeah, there are those, and I think that's also kind of what makes this such a good choice, because of the different themes and options and the great art by, I think it's Nayade is the artist who's done art a long time ago in the industry. Yeah, really cool and vibrant artwork, and just the different themes like John mentioned: historical, fairy tale, myth. And then there's animals, wild animals. And the other night I also saw there's actually like a Halloween theme one now. So yeah, those are just very good options for you to choose what theme you want.
Yeah.
So yes,
that's my number one.
And so that concludes our top 5 stocking stuffer games. We hope both of our lists give you guys some good options on different things you can gift to people this holiday season, and also hopefully gave you a good idea of maybe what to expect when playing those games, how they play, how they feel. And so if you found this useful, helpful, hope you'll share this video with people you play board games with, friends and family. Hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel and following us on Instagram at IGotBoardGame. And until next time, we will see you then. Bye.
Bye.